She was in pain every day. The lone rancher who shocked the town. Clara Dawson lived on the edge of a quiet small town, where the landscape stretched for miles with rolling fields, dusty trails, and the occasional cluster of trees that offered shade during the hot summer days. From a distance, her ranch looked like a painting, an old wooden house with a wide porch, barns weathered by time, and fences that lined the property in perfect straight lines. The town itself was used to seeing Clara in the mornings, her figure moving slowly but steadily among her animals. Yet few really knew what life was like behind the walls of her house or beneath the calm surface she presented to the world.
Clara had grown up in this town.
Her family had owned the ranch for generations, and from a young age she learned the rhythms of ranch life. She could feed the chickens before the sun rose, milk the cows before the first cup of coffee, and mend a fence without hesitation. But while many admired her skills, most assumed she was just another hard-working rancher, someone tough and self-reliant. They did not see the secret that Clara carried with her every day, a secret that shaped every action, every decision, and every quiet moment of her life. From the outside, Clara appeared strong and composed. She walked with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing, and she moved through her chores with precision. Her neighbors would sometimes wave from the roads that cut across the fields, and she would nod back politely. She always seemed friendly but distant. There was something about Clara that made people respect her space without question. Some called her stubborn. Others admired her independence. Almost no one guessed the full truth. Clara was in pain every single day. Her pain had begun years before. Gradually at first, a fall from a horse when she was a teenager had left her with lingering injuries, and as she grew older, other health challenges emerged. Doctors tried to explain her symptoms, giving her medications and therapies, but nothing seemed to fully ease the discomfort. Some days the pain was mild, like an annoying weight she carried quietly. Other days it was sharp and relentless, making her movements slow and deliberate.
Even then, Clara never allowed herself to complain in front of others. She had learned early that people often did not understand invisible struggles.
They could see a broken leg or a bruised arm, but the silent aches, the constant tension, the heaviness in her bones, those were hers alone. Clara's daily routine had become a careful dance around her own limitations. She would wake before dawn, the chill of the early morning air brushing against her face, and stretch her stiff muscles before stepping outside. She wore worn boots and practical clothing, and her hands, though rough from years of work, were careful and precise. First, she fed the chickens, making sure each had enough grain and fresh water. Then she would move on to the cows, gently guiding them into the milking area, her body aching with each step. Some mornings she paused more often than usual, leaning against the fence or taking a moment to breathe, letting the rising sun warm her before continuing. Despite the discomfort, Clara's love for her animals was apparent. She spoke softly to them, calling each by name. The cows seemed to recognize her gentle voice, and even the skittish ones responded to her calm presence. Her dogs, two energetic border collies, ran alongside her as she moved through the ranch, yipping happily. They sensed her pain sometimes, and when she winced or slowed down, they would nudge her legs or sit nearby as if offering silent support. The connection she had with her animals gave her a sense of purpose and joy that pain could not fully overshadow. The townspeople often wondered why Clara chose to live so far from the center of town. She rarely visited the market or social gatherings unless it was absolutely necessary. Letters and packages were a lifeline for her, and she enjoyed the quiet companionship of the fields more than the crowded streets. Many assumed it was just her nature, independent, solitary, maybe a little lonely. But in truth, living alone allowed her to manage her pain without judgment or interference. She could rest when she needed, pace herself through her chores, and maintain control over her life in a way that was impossible in a more bustling environment. Her house, though modest, reflected Clara's personality. It was practical, with every item in its place, but it also held warmth. Hand-stitched quilts adorned the beds, and the kitchen smelled faintly of herbs she dried herself. Windows framed the fields outside, letting in light that changed with the seasons. Clara often sat by the windows in the evenings, sipping tea, feeling the ache in her muscles, and watching the sky shift from gold to pink to deep indigo. It was her quiet sanctuary, a place where she could confront her pain without the pressures of the outside world. Evenings were sometimes the hardest. As the day's work ended and the adrenaline that carried her through the chores faded, the pain seemed sharper. It wrapped around her like a heavy blanket, reminding her that no matter how strong she appeared, her body had limits. She often massaged her hands and legs, stretched carefully, and sometimes used warm compresses she had learned to make herself. Sleep came irregularly, and some nights she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how life had become a constant balancing act between responsibility, independence, and suffering. It is the story of someone who moves through pain with grace, who finds purpose in caring for others even when she herself is struggling, and who embodies a resilience that is invisible yet profound. The town saw a hard-working rancher, but the reality was far deeper. A life lived with courage, dignity, and unwavering determination, even in the face of daily, unrelenting pain. As the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the fields, Clara would finish her chores, take one last look at her animals, and retreat into her house. The quiet of the evening wrapped around her like a familiar friend. She knew the coming day would bring the same challenges, the same aches, and the same routines, but she also knew that she would meet it head-on. For Clara Dawson, every day was a test of endurance, a quiet battle fought in silence, and yet a life lived with purpose and strength, a life that few truly understood, but one that defined her in ways the town could never fully see. Clara Dawson's life on the ranch was not only defined by the vast open fields and the animals she cared for, but also by the constant presence of pain that shaped her every day. Unlike people who face visible struggles, Clara's suffering was invisible, and that made it all the more isolating. She moved through her chores and daily life with a quiet determination, but beneath her calm exterior, her body reminded her constantly that each task came with a cost. Even simple activities like bending to tie a shoelace or lifting a bucket of feed were battles she fought silently, refusing to let anyone witness her vulnerability. The town she lived near was small, close-knit, and full of people who prided themselves on knowing one another. They noticed Clara's habits, her routines, and her distance, but few understood the reason behind them. When she walked slowly down the dirt road into town for supplies or occasional errands, her neighbors sometimes whispered among themselves. Some thought she was stubborn. Some thought she was eccentric, and others admired her independence without realizing the hidden struggle beneath it. Clara had learned not to correct them. Explaining her pain was tiring, and most people simply could not understand what it was like to live every day with invisible discomfort. Her mornings started early, as they always had, before the first hints of sunlight streaked across the horizon.
Clara would rise, stretching her stiff limbs as she silently willed them to cooperate.
Some mornings, the stiffness felt almost unbearable, but she had routines that helped her move through it. Warm water, gentle stretching, and soft music on a small radio helped her body wake slowly. She always dressed in practical clothing, preferring comfort over fashion, and made sure her boots were tightly laced before stepping outside into the cold or the heat, depending on the season. Her hands, worn and rough from years of hard work, moved carefully, balancing the need for efficiency with the reality of her fragile body. The chores on the ranch were relentless. Feeding the chickens, herding the cows, maintaining the fences, and checking the water troughs, all of it required strength and endurance. Some days, Clara could complete her tasks with her usual efficiency. Other days, each movement was slow, measured, and painful. Her legs would ache with a deep, dull throb, and her arms felt heavy and uncooperative. Yet she never allowed herself to complain or falter visibly. She believed that giving in to the pain, even momentarily, was not an option. The animals depended on her, and the ranch depended on her. Her responsibility to them outweighed her desire to rest at least most of the time. Despite the challenges, Clara had an unshakable sense of duty. Her animals sensed her presence and responded to it. The cows knew when she entered the pasture, and the chickens would cluck softly as she moved among them. Even on days when she walked slowly, her gentle voice and firm guidance were enough to keep everything in order. Her dogs, ever alert, were her constant companions. They stayed close when she faltered, sometimes nudging her leg or brushing against her arm as if offering silent encouragement. For Clara, these small gestures of connection were profound, reminding her that she was not entirely alone in her struggle. Clara had tried multiple ways to ease her pain. Doctors prescribed medications, but they often made her drowsy or caused side effects that interfered with her ability to work. She tried physical therapy, stretches, and home remedies, but nothing offered a permanent solution. Some treatments helped for a short time, while others made her pain worse. Over the years, she had developed an intimate understanding of her own body, learning to listen to it, anticipate flare-ups, and adjust her activities accordingly. She knew when to push through discomfort and when to rest, a skill honed by necessity and refined through years of experience. Social interactions were difficult for Clara. While she valued human connection, she often found it exhausting. Even small gatherings could leave her body aching for days afterward. The townspeople occasionally invited her to events or dinners, but she politely declined more often than not. She feared that if she attended, she might appear weak or complain, and that was something she could never allow. Her pride and independence were as much a shield as her resilience. She wanted to be seen as capable, not fragile, and so she continued to live on the outskirts, moving quietly through her days, her pain hidden behind a calm exterior that few could penetrate. One of the most challenging parts of Clara's struggle was the unpredictability of her pain. Some days were manageable, almost normal. She could work for hours without pause, tending to her animals and completing tasks efficiently. Other days, even standing for a few minutes, brought sharp, stabbing discomfort. It was as though her body had a mind of its own, and she had learned to respect it without letting it dictate her entire life. This unpredictability made planning difficult. She rarely made long trips into town, avoided social engagements, and kept her routines flexible enough to accommodate sudden flare-ups. It was a delicate balance, and she had become skilled at navigating it, but it took constant attention and effort. Despite the isolation, Clara found solace in small pleasures. Early mornings offered quiet beauty, the way the fog lifted from the fields, the sound of birds greeting the sun, and the gentle movement of cattle across the pasture. In these moments, she felt connected to something larger than herself, something enduring and reliable, unlike her unpredictable body. She often paused to take in the scenery, allowing herself to breathe deeply and appreciate the simple, quiet joys of ranch life. These moments reminded her why she persevered, why she continued, despite the pain that accompanied every step. Evenings were a different kind of challenge. After a full day of work, Clara's body often felt heavier than usual. The adrenaline and focus that carried her through the day faded, leaving her more aware of her aches and stiffness. She would sit by the fireplace with a warm cup of tea, her body relaxing as best it could. She used gentle massages, warm compresses, and quiet stretches to ease the discomfort, all while reflecting on the day. Sometimes she allowed herself a private moment of frustration or sadness, acknowledging that living with constant pain was difficult. But these moments were brief, for Clara was always ready to rise again, face the next day, and care for the life she had built. One of the hardest parts of Clara's struggle was the misunderstanding she faced from others. People often assumed that if someone was capable of running a ranch alone, they must be completely strong and unaffected by physical limitations. Few understood the depth of her endurance or the daily effort required just to maintain the life she had. Clara rarely corrected these assumptions. She believed that her life was her own, and that she did not owe anyone an explanation. Her quiet perseverance became her identity, a testament to her strength in the face of invisible challenges. Despite her struggles, Clara remained fiercely independent. She refused to ask for help unless it was absolutely necessary, and even then she approached it cautiously. Pride and self-reliance were central to who she was, but they were not born of arrogance. They were born of necessity, a life that demanded resilience and quiet courage. She had learned to navigate her pain with intelligence and patience, discovering ways to live fully despite the limitations imposed by her body. Through it all, Clara's connection to her ranch and animals remained her anchor. The land, the animals, and the routines provided structure, purpose, and a sense of control. They were constants in a life otherwise dominated by unpredictable pain. Caring for her animals, maintaining the fences, and tending the fields were not just chores. They were affirmations of her will, evidence that she could continue to live a meaningful life despite the hardships she faced daily. Clara's life in these years paints a picture of quiet strength and resilience. She faced a challenge that few could understand, yet she met it with dignity, determination, and an unwavering sense of responsibility. Her story was not one of dramatic heroics or sudden events, but of steady courage, the kind that shows itself in everyday decisions, actions, and choices. Every step she took, every chore she completed, and every night she endured without complaint spoke of a remarkable endurance that few ever witnessed firsthand. And so Clara Dawson continued. Day after day, living on the ranch she loved, caring for the animals she adored, and navigating a life filled with pain that she rarely allowed anyone to see. She moved quietly, steadily, and persistently through her days, her strength hidden in plain sight. She was a woman defined not by the suffering she endured, but by the resilience, patience, and courage she displayed in meeting life's challenges. An unseen hero whose story had only just begun to unfold. Clara Dawson's life had always been a quiet rhythm of chores, pain, and small moments of peace. The townspeople saw her as the solitary rancher who kept to herself, and most assumed her life was simple because she never complained. Yet behind the calm surface, Clara lived each day with a hidden struggle, a battle that no one could see. Her pain was constant, and her strength was often taken for granted. But everything began to change one winter morning when a sudden, unexpected event would shift how the town saw her forever. It was early in the day, and snow had begun to fall lightly, dusting the fields and rooftops in white. Clara had risen with the sun, as she always did, her body stiff and aching from the cold. She moved slowly through her morning chores, feeding the animals and checking the water troughs. The frost made the ground slippery, and each step required careful attention. Her muscles ached more than usual, but she pushed forward, determined to complete her tasks before the temperature dropped further. The ranch, her animals, and her routines were her responsibility, and she refused to let the cold or her pain stop her. Clara had just finished tending to the chickens when she noticed smoke rising from the direction of the barn. At first, she thought it might be steam from the early morning frost, but then the smell reached her. Sharp, acrid, unmistakable. The barn was on fire. Flames licked the edges of the wooden structure, and thick black smoke billowed into the sky. Panic gripped her for only a moment, quickly replaced by a surge of determination. The animals inside were in danger. Cows, goats, and horses were trapped, and Clara knew she had no time to wait for help. Without hesitation, she grabbed a heavy coat, her gloves, and a small fire extinguisher and ran toward the barn. The snow crunched beneath her boots, each step a reminder of the pain in her legs and back, but she ignored it. Every second counted. The fire had already begun to spread and the smoke stung her eyes and throat. Clara's heart pounded, not from fear, but from urgency and determination. She had faced pain every day, but this was different. This was life and death for the creatures she cared for. As she reached the barn, she could hear the distressed sounds of the animals. Horses whinnied, cows bellowed, and chickens squawked in confusion. Clara shouted to calm them, her voice steady despite the chaos. She opened the barn doors carefully, wincing as her joints protested. Inside, the heat was intense, the flames flickering dangerously close to the wooden beams. Clara moved quickly. Leading the animals out one by one, she guided the horses to safety, helped the cows through the snow, and even carried a few of the smaller animals when she could. Each movement was painful, every step a test of endurance, but she refused to stop. Neighbors began to arrive, drawn by the smoke and the sound of Clara's shouting. They were shocked to see her inside the barn, moving through the smoke, lifting and guiding the animals despite the obvious strain on her body. Some tried to help, but Clara was in control. She directed them where to go, what to do, and how to keep the animals safe. Her calm authority in the midst of the fire amazed everyone. They could see the pain etched on her face, the way her muscles trembled, but they also saw a courage and determination that was almost impossible to comprehend. The fire was intense, but Clara refused to leave any animal behind. She moved through the barn, checking stalls, calling out names, and making sure that every creature had made it to safety. Her hands were blistered from the heat, her lungs burned from the smoke, and her body ached in ways that would leave her bedridden for days afterward. Yet she did not stop. She had always faced pain silently, and now she faced it in its most extreme form. Her strength was not just physical, but emotional and mental. She could endure, adapt, and act even when her body wanted to give in. By the time the fire department arrived, the worst was already under control. The firefighters were surprised to see so many animals already safe outside the barn. Clara was leaning against the fence, catching her breath, her coat covered in soot and snow, her face streaked with dirt. She looked exhausted, in pain, but also triumphant. The neighbors who had come to help stood around her, murmuring in awe. They had never seen someone so committed, so strong, and so fearless. Clara had always been a quiet presence in the town, but now she was impossible to ignore. Word of the incident spread quickly. The town was abuzz with stories of the lone rancher who had braved a fire to save her animals. People who had only seen Clara from a distance now began to understand the depth of her courage. They realized that her quiet demeanor, her solitary life, and her reserved nature were not signs of indifference or stubbornness. They were the result of years of enduring pain and hardship, and a life shaped by responsibility and love for her animals. In the days that followed, the town rallied around Clara. Neighbors came to help repair the damaged barn, bringing tools, materials, and manpower. Children who had once waved shyly at her now visited, curious about the woman who had risked everything to save her animals. The local newspaper ran a story about her bravery, calling her the lone rancher who shocked the town. Interviews with neighbors, friends, and even strangers painted a picture of a woman whose life had been defined by quiet endurance and incredible courage. For Clara, the recognition was new and unexpected. She was not used to being in the spotlight or receiving praise. Her life had always been about responsibilities, not accolades. Yet, as she saw the townspeople coming together to help rebuild her barn, she felt a sense of connection she had not experienced in years. She realized that her pain and isolation had not made her invisible. They had simply hidden the full story of her strength from those who had not known her well. The incident also changed the way people interacted with her. They approached her with respect and understanding, no longer assuming she was merely independent or eccentric. When she spoke about her pain or the challenges she faced, people listened with empathy. They asked questions, offered support, and shared stories of their own struggles. Clara began to feel that she was no longer carrying her burdens entirely alone. The town, which had once seemed distant and judgmental, had begun to recognize her humanity, her courage, and her resilience. Despite the attention, Clara remained humble. She did not see herself as a hero, only as someone who did what needed to be done. She continued her daily routines, caring for the animals, tending the fields, and maintaining the ranch. But now, there was a subtle change in her life. Neighbors offered to help with chores, sometimes just standing nearby to provide company or support. Children brought small gifts or notes of encouragement. The community that had once seemed distant now became a source of quiet strength for Clara, just as she had been a source of inspiration for them. The fire was a turning point in Clara's life, not because it changed her routine or her pain, but because it revealed her inner strength to the world. It showed that her quiet endurance, her careful management of pain, and her dedication to her responsibilities were not just admirable, they were extraordinary. The townspeople had always seen her work ethic, but now they understood the context, the hidden struggle, and the courage that defined her life. Clara, who had always been defined by her pain, was now recognized for her resilience and bravery. In the weeks that followed, Clara reflected on what had happened. She realized that while her pain would never fully disappear, her life had changed in meaningful ways. She had formed connections with people who genuinely cared for her, and she had earned a level of respect that went beyond mere admiration for her independence. She understood that vulnerability did not diminish her strength. Rather, it allowed others to see her humanity and her courage. For the first time, Clara felt that her pain and her perseverance could inspire, not just isolate her. The incident also deepened her bond with her animals. They had always been a source of comfort and purpose, but now, after facing the fire together, that bond felt even stronger. Clara saw them not just as creatures to care for, but as companions who had endured alongside her, witnesses to her bravery and resilience. Each day, as she fed, guided, and tended them, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. A reminder that life, even when difficult and painful, could still hold moments of triumph, connection, and meaning. Clara Dawson's story in this part of her life is one of transformation. The fire revealed the depth of her courage to the town, turning a quiet, solitary rancher into a figure of admiration and respect. It was a moment that shifted perception, built connections, and highlighted the extraordinary strength hidden within ordinary routines. Clara had always faced pain with dignity and determination, but now the world could see what she had been silently enduring for years. Her story became a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of courage, and the profound impact one individual's bravery can have on an entire community. After the fire at Clara Dawson's barn, the town's view of her began to change in ways she had never anticipated. For years, the people had only seen her as the quiet, solitary rancher who lived on the edge of town, someone strong, independent, and perhaps a little mysterious. They admired her work ethic from a distance, but had little understanding of her life or the challenges she faced every day. The fire, however, had shifted everything. Clara's bravery had revealed the strength hidden beneath her calm exterior. And suddenly, neighbors, friends, and even strangers were seeing her in a completely new light. The days that followed the fire were filled with a surprising amount of support. Neighbors came to help rebuild the damaged barn, bringing tools, materials, and sometimes just their presence to make the work lighter. Children visited, curious to hear stories about the animals and the woman who had risked everything to save them. Volunteers offered to help with chores on the ranch, even just to accompany Clara as she worked so she wouldn't have to endure the pain alone. The small town, once distant and reserved toward her, now seemed to rally around her, offering gestures of kindness and appreciation that she had not expected. Clara found herself slowly opening up in ways she never had before. She began to share stories about her daily life, about the challenges of living with chronic pain, and about the responsibility of caring for a ranch on her own. People listened, truly listened, and for the first time in years, Clara felt understood. She spoke about her pain not to gain sympathy but to explain why she lived the way she did, why she often declined invitations, why she preferred solitude, and why she had relied so heavily on routines and her own strength. The town began to see her as a whole person, not just a quiet figure who kept to herself. For Clara, these new connections were both comforting and unfamiliar. She had spent so long navigating life alone that opening up required courage. At first, she was hesitant, cautious of revealing too much. She worried that people would pity her or treat her differently, but she soon realized that sharing her experiences created understanding, and understanding created empathy. Neighbors began to offer assistance without condescension. Friends asked how they could help without overstepping boundaries, and even casual acquaintances treated her with newfound respect. It was a delicate shift, but one that began to change her life in meaningful ways. The town's children were particularly drawn to Clara and her animals. They would come to the ranch to see the cows, horses, and chickens, asking endless questions and watching as she guided each animal with patience and care. Clara took joy in teaching them, showing them how to feed the animals properly, how to approach them safely, and how to recognize the signs of distress or discomfort. In doing so, she formed bonds with the younger generation, passing on knowledge and values that went beyond ranching. She taught them responsibility, empathy, and courage, lessons she had learned firsthand through years of living with pain and managing her duties alone. Adults in the town also began to interact with Clara differently. They asked for advice about animals, farm management, and even dealing with life's challenges. People who had once assumed she was unapproachable or distant were now seeking her guidance, inspired by the way she had handled the barn fire. They admired her not only for her bravery but for her wisdom, patience, and resilience. Clara realized that the very qualities she had cultivated through years of struggle, independence, problem-solving, and quiet determination, were now the traits that allowed her to connect deeply with her community. The fire had not just changed the town's perception of Clara, it had changed her perception of herself. She began to see that accepting help did not make her weak, nor did it diminish her independence. In fact, allowing others to assist her allowed her to focus on what truly mattered, the care of her animals and the continuation of the ranch. The community's support lightened her burden, making daily routines more manageable and even more meaningful. Clara discovered that there was strength in vulnerability, and that sharing life's challenges with others could create bonds that were deeply rewarding. Even as Clara grew closer to the town, she remained mindful of her limitations. Her chronic pain had not disappeared, and she continued to face the same physical struggles each day. Some days were harder than others, and she still had to pace herself carefully, rest when needed, and manage her body with attention and care. Yet, now she did not face these challenges entirely alone. She had learned to communicate her needs, to ask for help when necessary, and to accept assistance without guilt. The small gestures, a neighbor bringing extra hay, a friend helping mend a fence, a child accompanying her on a walk through the pasture, made a world of difference. Through these interactions, Clara's sense of purpose expanded. Her life had always been about maintaining the ranch and caring for her animals, but now it included a broader sense of community. She realized that her experiences, knowledge, and resilience could be shared to inspire and educate others. She began mentoring younger ranchers, offering advice on managing livestock, maintaining land, and coping with the physical demands of ranch work. Her story of endurance and bravery became a quiet legend in the town, and people began to look up to her not only for her skills, but for her character. Social gatherings, once daunting, became more approachable for Clara. She attended town events occasionally, no longer feeling the need to hide in the background or withdraw entirely. Neighbors greeted her warmly, and conversations flowed naturally. Clara still preferred her quiet moments on the ranch, but she no longer felt the same isolation that had defined her life for so long. The connections she had formed were genuine, built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared experiences. In these relationships, she found comfort, encouragement, and a sense of belonging that had been missing for years. One afternoon, as Clara sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills, she reflected on how far her life had come. The fire, terrifying as it had been, had opened the door to change. It had revealed her strength to others, drawn people closer, and allowed her to recognize the value of connection. She realized that life could be both challenging and beautiful, that pain and resilience could coexist, and that independence did not require isolation. Clara felt a sense of gratitude, quiet but profound, for the town that had come to support her and for the new relationships that had blossomed in the wake of the fire. Clara's animals remained at the heart of her life, but now they were joined by a network of human companions who respected and admired her. She continued to care for her ranch with dedication, but she also allowed herself to share the load, to accept help, and to engage with the community. The town had not only witnessed her courage, they had become part of it. Together, they helped rebuild not just the barn, but the sense of trust, friendship, and mutual support that had been absent for so long. Through these experiences, Clara learned that strength was not only about enduring pain silently, but also about opening one's life to connection and collaboration. Her story began to take on a new dimension, one of shared resilience, community, and empathy. She discovered that inspiring others did not require grand gestures. Sometimes it was in the quiet moments of care in guiding a child, tending to an animal, or accepting a neighbor's help that true courage and leadership were revealed. As months passed, Clara's life found a new rhythm. She remained the same dedicated rancher, still facing pain every day, but now she did so with support, understanding, and friendship. The town's perception had shifted from seeing her as a distant figure to recognizing her as a remarkable woman whose courage, wisdom, and compassion enriched the entire community. Clara herself embraced this change, learning that resilience was not a solitary endeavor and that life's burdens could be shared without diminishing one's strength. Clara Dawson's story in this part of her life is one of transformation and connection. The fire had revealed her bravery, but it was the town's response, combined with her willingness to accept support, that allowed her life to become richer and more meaningful. She discovered that human connection could coexist with independence, that empathy and understanding could coexist with resilience, and that true strength often lies in the ability to accept help while continuing to persevere. Clara's journey was no longer one of quiet endurance alone. It had become a story of shared courage, community, and the profound impact that one person's resilience can have on the lives of many. Over the months and years that followed, Clara Dawson's life settled into a rhythm that balanced her independence with the new connections she had formed. The fire had been a turning point, revealing her courage to the town, but it was the gradual growth of relationships, understanding, and respect that truly transformed her daily life. Clara continued to live with pain as she always had, but now she carried it alongside a supportive community that admired her, learned from her, and shared in her struggles and triumphs. Clara's animals remained at the center of her world. Each morning she rose before the sun, as she had for years, to feed the chickens, guide the cows, and tend to the horses. Yet now, these routines were less lonely. Neighbors often stopped by, offering to help with chores or simply to keep her company as she worked. They carried hay, repaired fences, and assisted with feeding, but they never took over. Clara maintained her role as the caretaker, the one with ultimate responsibility for the ranch, but she allowed herself to lean on the support of others. It was a delicate balance, one that she managed carefully, but it made her days more manageable and more meaningful. The town continued to marvel at Clara's bravery. Her story spread far beyond the local community. Newspapers and magazines ran articles about the lone rancher who shocked the town, highlighting not only her courage during the fire but also her resilience in living with chronic pain every day. People were inspired by her quiet determination, the way she faced challenges without complaint, and her unwavering dedication to her animals. Clara never sought attention or praise, but she began to understand that her life, her struggles, and her strength could serve as an example to others. Her story became a symbol of courage, endurance, and the power of perseverance. As her reputation grew, so did the sense of connection between Clara and the people around her. She began mentoring younger ranchers, offering guidance on handling animals, maintaining land, and managing the physical demands of ranch life. Her advice extended beyond practical skills. She shared lessons in patience, resilience, and the importance of understanding one's own limits. She taught others that strength was not simply about pushing through pain, but also about knowing when to ask for help, when to rest, and when to adapt. Through these interactions, Clara's knowledge and experience became a gift to the community, allowing her to impact lives in ways she had never imagined. Even with the admiration and attention, Clara remained humble. She continued her daily routines with the same quiet dedication, rising early to work the land and care for her animals. Her pain was still a constant companion, but she had learned to navigate it with skill, pacing herself, stretching carefully, and using the support of the community when needed. She knew that her strength was not just in enduring the pain alone, but in managing it wisely, allowing her to continue living a meaningful, productive life. Clara also discovered a newfound sense of purpose through the relationships she built. Neighbors brought gifts, offered company, and shared stories about their own lives. Children visited frequently, eager to see the animals and learn from Clara's experience. She told them stories about the ranch, about the animals, and about the lessons she had learned from a life filled with challenge and responsibility. Through these interactions, Clara found joy, connection, and a sense of fulfillment that had been missing for much of her life. She realized that while independence was important, human connection brought richness, warmth, and resilience to life in ways that solitude could not. The fire and its aftermath also gave Clara the chance to reflect on her life in ways she had never allowed herself before. She thought about the years she had spent in quiet isolation, facing pain alone and managing the ranch with meticulous care. She understood that while her independence had been a source of pride, it had also contributed to loneliness. The support and admiration she now received did not diminish her strength. It enhanced it. She learned that true courage was not measured by the ability to endure suffering alone, but by the capacity to persevere, to lead, and to inspire others while remaining honest about one's limitations. Clara's story became a part of the town's identity. People often referred to her as a symbol of perseverance, someone whose life exemplified courage, responsibility, and dedication. Local schools invited her to speak to students about ranching, resilience, and the importance of caring for animals. She shared her experiences with honesty and humility, explaining that life was rarely easy, but that persistence, careful planning, and a willingness to seek support could make challenges manageable. The younger generation listened intently, inspired not only by her bravery during the fire but by the years she had spent living with chronic pain and still giving her best every day. Through these experiences, Clara realized that her life had become larger than the boundaries of her ranch. She had influenced her town in ways she had never imagined, offering lessons in courage, empathy, and resilience. People looked to her not only for practical guidance, but also for inspiration in how to live with dignity, patience, and perseverance. Clara understood that the fire had been a catalyst, but it was her consistent dedication, her quiet endurance, and her willingness to connect with others that truly created her legacy. Even as she embraced her newfound connections, Clara remained grounded in her daily life. She continued to rise early, tend to her animals, and maintain the land she loved so dearly. Her routines remained her anchor, providing structure and purpose. But now, these routines were enriched by the presence of friends, neighbors, and visitors who respected her space while offering companionship and support. Clara had found a balance between independence and connection, learning that leaning on others did not weaken her. It strengthened her ability to continue living fully even in the presence of pain. Clara's life also inspired the community to become more compassionate and attentive. People learned to recognize that strength could be quiet, resilience could be hidden, and courage could manifest in small, consistent acts. The way she managed her ranch, faced her pain, and helped others became an example for everyone. Her story encouraged the town to look beyond appearances, to appreciate the hidden struggles of those around them, and to offer support without judgment. Clara's influence extended far beyond the barn, the fields, and the animals. It shaped the hearts and minds of an entire community. Over time, Clara began to notice subtle but profound changes in herself. She felt less burdened by isolation, more confident in sharing her experiences, and more at peace with her pain. While it still challenged her daily, she no longer faced it alone. She discovered the power of connection, the importance of mutual respect, and the joy that comes from helping others while allowing them to help her. Clara realized that her life, once defined by quiet suffering and solitary endurance, had transformed into a story of shared strength, community, and inspiration. As the years passed, Clara's influence continued to grow. The ranch flourished, not only because of her dedication, but also because of the relationships she had built. The barn was rebuilt stronger than before, with the help of neighbors who had witnessed her courage. The animals thrived under her care, and young ranchers who had learned from her grew confident in their own abilities. Clara's legacy was not built solely on her physical work or her ability to endure pain. It was built on the impact she had on others, the lessons she shared, and the inspiration she provided to those around her. In the evenings, Clara often sat on the porch, sipping tea and watching the sun set over the fields. The landscape looked the same as it had for decades, yet everything felt different. She had faced unimaginable challenges, endured pain that few could understand, and lived a life that demanded more than most could imagine. Yet she had emerged stronger, not in spite of her hardships, but because of them. Clara understood that life's difficulties had shaped her into someone capable of inspiring, teaching, and leading by example. She endured pain every day, lived independently, and cared for her animals with unwavering dedication. Yet she also discovered the power of connection, empathy, and mutual support. Her life became a source of inspiration, not just for her town, but for everyone who heard her story. She taught that true courage is not always loud or visible. It is often quiet, persistent, and carried every single day in acts both large and small. By the end of her journey, Clara had become more than the solitary rancher the town once knew. She was a symbol of resilience, a teacher, a mentor, and a friend. She had shown that strength and vulnerability could coexist, that independence and community were not mutually exclusive, and that living with pain did not diminish the value of a life fully embraced. Clara Dawson had not only survived, she had inspired, connected, and left a legacy that would be remembered for generations to come. Her story reminds everyone that life's challenges, no matter how difficult, can be met with courage and grace. It is a story of perseverance, empathy, and the profound impact one person can have on a community. Clara had faced the invisible battles of chronic pain, endured the physical and emotional trials of running a ranch alone, and yet she emerged as a beacon of hope, strength, and inspiration. Her legacy was not just the land she tended or the animals she saved, it was the lives she touched, the hearts she changed, and the enduring example of resilience she left behind for everyone who followed.